all about writing with Ben and Sara.
Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything about the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode 2, part 1 on our series on writing life. I'm Ben, here with my co-host Sara, who is an award-winning, best-selling author, screenwriter, editor, and TED Talk presenter.
And I am Sara, here with my co-host Ben, who is also an award-winning best-selling author and ghostwriter, editor, and publisher. So welcome back. I hope you are excited to hear about writing life, which if you are a writer and you have done hashtag, writing life or writer's life, you know that this is a big part of being a writer or an author and, being a content creator essentially. And we wanted to talk a lot about the pieces that go into being a writer and having a life as a writer. And we're going to back all the way up to us and give you a little bit of our whys and our hows so that you can see where we started from and understand, why we do what we do. And we're hoping that that will give you a reason to sit down. And if you haven't figured out your why do you do this to yourself every day? Why do you sit with 18 cups of coffee and in your little, cave to write and say no to social things because it's pouring out of you and you want to get it out before writer's block or whatever it is? We want you to hear ours, and then maybe you will know yours, and that will help clarify those moments of writer's block or why am I doing this to myself, self-talk. So I'll ask you the first question, Ben, and how did you first start writing?
Yeah, well, we have to go all the way back in the mists of time to when I was 12 years old. And I'm not going to actually say what year that was, but the Smurfs were a big, hot cartoon on TV at the time. So that'll let some people place that. And I'm not talking about the movies either. I'm talking about the
No,
old TV.
yeah, I remember those.
Okay, okay, good. Anyway, I was, I think I was in middle school, and I was actually having a lot of anger management issues. I was a really angry young man, and I was having trouble for finding a place to direct all my energy. And I'd done some theater up until then. And my dad sat me down one day and said, "Well, you've always got a lot of energy, got a lot on your mind. Have you ever thought about writing a play?" And I thought, no, I don't think I want to write a play, but a story, a short story. Maybe I could do that. And I just recently read this Smurf book called The Smurfs and the Howley Bird. And I thought I could totally riff on that. And I could write my own story about my little Lego people called Little Men. And so I wrote a story called about the Little Men and the Rock, which was, shall we say, heavily inspired by the Smurfs and the Howley Bird. Now, I hadn't learned about the word plagiarism yet, but I was only 12, so give me a break. But I churned out this 12-page short story in a couple of days, and it just ignited something in me. This idea just to create stories and tell stories. And so that one story about the little men on the rock grew into a series of 7 stories, all about the little men and their adventures. And I became less and less plagiaristic as I went, as I explored my own ideas and brought them to life. And it just started this compulsion. Just I had to create, I had to tell stories. And I've never really stopped since then. So started when I was 12, was writing through high school, was writing through university, was writing when I got out into the real world as my career. And, sometimes something would come along, which we'll talk about, that would stop me from writing for a while. But the drive to create and the drive to write has never gone away. And it was awakened at one time when I was 12 years old. And my dad said, "You need to find an outlet for your energy." And I found it in writing. And it's been amazing. How about you, Sara? How did you first get started on writing?
I couldn't give an age. I definitely was in elementary school when I first started writing stories. And my stories, though, were not 12-page, nicely created, short stories. They were usually notebooks, and I still have some. They were terrible. That that I would draw, like, like almost like I would draw. And then I would have speech bubbles going over for the dialogue, right? And then I would have this was because it was like it didn't even occur to me that I could write like a chapter book or use punctuation. We didn't have a computer, so there was no way, we didn't have a computer. I didn't have a way to type anything at all till I was almost out of high school. And uh and I had, little descriptions above the speech bubbles about what was going on. It's terrible. The pacing, you could go from one page where someone would be getting married, the next page there'd be a child, the next page would be that child's getting married, and the last page would be like the tombstone. Like it was fast. I had no idea what I was doing other than I had stories.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
um I couldn't even tell you what the first ones were. I definitely know, speaking of plagiarism, that I expanded. I thought this was brilliant. I expanded on what the life of the Little Mermaid would be if she stayed after she stayed on land.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
um here we're gonna get into I feel like I'm blushing, but like I was like, okay, and she would have to give birth like a human instead of a fish. So like what would that be like? And I'm drawing pictures. My dad saw these and he's like, "What is this? What are you doing?" Um, so I got a little less graphic, and a little more tasteful, but there's some doozies I still have. They're terrible, and I've kept them just as a reminder that I used to spell village Vigge because I couldn't spell, and we didn't have, easy access to Google to check. So I guess bottom line, I think I've been writing since I could draw, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. I don't have a day that I could tell you were an actual catalyst. I've always been writing. I've
Well,
just got
that's really interesting. Yeah, because it not necessarily writing, but storytelling, right?
yeah.
You've been telling stories and different. I mean, of course, you're a screenwriter as well these days. So, yes, it's still technically writing, but it's quite a different medium from novels, right? So, um, the drive is the same, right? The medium may change, but the drive to tell stories, and I think that's really it sounds like for both of us. That's just we had this energy that just had to get out of us. We had to tell stories. Interesting, you didn't have any ability to type when you started. I had this electric typewriter that my dad had brought home from work. And I, for some reason, decided to write my stories on that. I guess it was more professional if I'm typing, right, as opposed to actually, writing them. And again, I was 12. I had no idea how to type. So, like all of us, I began with the one finger hunt and peck, right? Which eventually became two fingers hunt and peck, which eventually became the whole hand to the point where I could write, I don't know, I've never been clocked, but very fast with one hand. Now, when I got to high school, they still offered typing classes, and you couldn't take a computer class until you'd taken the typing class. But with typing class, you had to type with two hands. And I thought, well, that's stupid. I can already type faster than any of them with one hand, um, and I can hold my coffee with the other. So even now, several years later, that I'm no longer 12, I still type with one hand, and I probably have well over 1 million words downrange with one hand. So it's my little party trick. When people ever actually see me type with one hand, they're just astonished by it. There it is. It's this magic hand just moving like a specter over the keyboard, and words are coming out on the screen. So yeah. So and you still do the drawing too. I mean, I've seen it in your books. Every single chapter still has a Domin original drawing at the front. So it's amazing what our early influences still hold on us.
Well, and I think that leads into kind of our whys, right? We've answered not only how and when, but why we do it. And I liken it to that I exist with a ball of energy that like is lodged behind my rib cage. It's not my heart, it's definitely different. But and it shoots out of my fingers, and if I'm truly inspired, I feel like it's radiating out of me. And sometimes it feels a little depleted, or I'm running out of kind of juice to write a story, but I always have to. And so I think sometimes our why are we writers is because we have no choice but to, or else explode. And my husband has no understanding of this. To him, writing a text message is plenty of writing in his day. And I could not, I mean, that's what I still remember. Again, I feel like I'm just going to be exposing so many things on this podcast. I remember in college, if I would have a class that I found boring, or I already, I wasn't learning anything and I could tell, and, I would sit and I would write short stories longhand for whole classes, just over and over and over and over, because it was that, or maybe jump and strangle my professor for wasting my time. Like, that's how, like, I couldn't handle it. I just, something else had to get out of me other than frustration. So, um, I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that's
Yeah, definitely. Like I said earlier, it's this drive that we have. And I was the same, sitting in boring university classes. I wouldn't necessarily be so brazen as to actually write the stories, but I'd definitely be taking notes to myself as to what I was going to write when I got back to my room, for sure. Because if you're taking bullet point notes, who knows what you're writing? Obviously, you're taking down extensive notes on what professor is saying to you,
you looked
right?
very studious. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and being one of the only ones actually still awake in the class too, I think that helped my participation marks. But anyway, they turned into good stories in the end. I think also often I'll be observing life and I'll see something and I'm like, wow, why did that happen? Like, why did that person do that? Why did it turn out that way? And it'll be a concept which fascinates me, and I want to explore that concept. Just sort of trying to walk through why would anybody do that? Okay, well, let's try and get into their head and let's write a story about it. And I find very often in my writing, I am exploring a concept. There's some big concept that I've been sort of grappling with in life, and I can explore it by writing, and I can break it down. I can put in characters that have, either they're for this idea or they're against this idea, and I can get into their heads and I can really break this idea down. So it is a way to, I guess, deal with life too. And if there's disturbing things out there, or even just fascinating things, it doesn't have to be bad. It could be really, really cool things. I want to explore that. I want to look at that in a way that I can't in my regular life. So I can create this setting where I have characters who I can put in these positions where they can explore it, and perhaps I can learn something from them from there. So that's definitely one of the reasons why I write, is to unlock these ideas that I'm sort of grappling with.
So it's almost like, for you, part of your why is to explore the human condition in various
Yeah,
ways and see if you can maybe answer some questions to life's mysteries for yourself, if not your readers.
yeah,
I mean, I think
yeah,
that's a huge part of what makes a good story. Anybody can write a story. And I don't want to sound general, many people can write a story, but can you write something that resonates? It's not just a generic plot with generic characters, but something that feels like it's feeding your, I don't want to say soul, but kind of that, and answering some questions you maybe didn't even know you had about people, or you'll go, oh my gosh, that's exactly like my brother-in-law. That's probably why he is like that. I don't know, but that's I think a big part of what makes the classics so good, because they are really in-depth studies of the human condition and its various forms.
yeah. And writers are often told, write what you know. And a lot of authors, aspiring authors that I've met over the years, will say, well, I don't know anything. I work at some desk job in the suburbs. Like, I don't know anything. Well, maybe that setting that you're in real life isn't the most inspiring place, but there's things that you experience at your job, with your friends, with your family, in the neighborhood. You can take those concepts that you're dealing with, like a bad boss, say, right? You could just write a story about a suburban office with a bad boss, or you could write about an evil space emperor and how did he get to be the way he is, right? If that's what you're interested in. So you can take this human concept, like you said, Sarah, the human condition. You can put it wherever you want. And if you don't want to write about suburban offices, that's okay. If you do, that's okay too. But if you don't, put it where you want to write about it. Maybe it's a Western mayor who's kind of corrupt. And why is he corrupt? Or maybe it's maybe it's someone just before the French Revolution, and they're going against what the revolutionaries need. Whatever milieu you would like to write in that fascinates you, you can take even the most seemingly banal things from your life, and you can inject them with energy through your writing.
That's a good way of saying it. You can use your life, whatever it is, as the catalyst for any kind of story. And I think that we forget that sometimes when you take enough writing courses or start to read about the trade and the craft, you can get caught up in well, I can't speak to this because I don't know it exactly. I've never visited that city or something. And I don't think we should put restrictions on ourselves as creators. And that's and we should be able to, yes, use our life, but then expand and expound on it and feel like there's really no limits to doing that. And we can find every nuance of our existence in our writing life
Mhm.
can be utilized that way. And I think we forget that sometimes, because I know I sometimes get locked into well, I can't write that because, and I have to pull myself out of that mentality and go, no, 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 I'm creating. These are fake people in a fake town. I get to do this. But I do want to circle a little bit on, you know, playing into the writing life. A ton of times on social media platforms, I see people saying, well, I want to finish my first novel. I've been working on it for X years. Or when I'm retired, I will write. And I know I get asked this question often, and I'm sure you do too. How do we make time to write? How do we? I know we're going to talk about time management and how you can organize your life in myriad ways uh, to find time for yourself to write, whether that's daily, weekly, monthly. But I think we should answer the question ourselves: how have we managed to do it, juggling families and other jobs and other responsibilities, and yet we still have been able to build books and screenplays? Do you want to talk about how you've done it? Because I know we're different, so I think we should show that.
Yeah, for sure. And different stages of my life have required different solutions. Like when I was young and single, then I'd come home from work in the evening, and the evening was mine. So I would just sit down and I would write, and it was easy because I had no one to answer to, right? So, but it still required discipline, right? Because there's always a good TV show or a good computer game or an invitation to go out. There's always something. And I guess that's where the drive comes from. I wanted to write. I wanted to do this. So I would prioritize it. Um, and then as life got busier, not only with my career, and I was traveling a lot and got married, have kids, your time becomes very precious. And what I would start to do is I would just find the little moments where I could write. And this is a real challenge because I know a lot of writers, they feel like they have to have the whole day free of distractions if they're going to write. Like I've heard a saying once, if a writer has an appointment at 2 in the afternoon, they can't do any writing that day. Right. And I get that. I get that feeling because, oh, I really shouldn't bother starting because I got to go do that thing and I'm distracted. And so what I had to do, which is realize I have an hour right now where no one needs me. So I am just going to sit down and I'm going to write. And the story is always churning along in my head. Like it's always there. So it's a matter of sitting down and just getting words onto the page. When I used to travel a lot for business, I was flying to Asia all the time. I was in business development. That 13-hour flight from Vancouver to Hong Kong is where I lived. And I got so good at writing on that plane because it was 13 hours where nobody could bother me and just keep the coffee coming. I'm just going to sit here and churn it out to the point now where I've actually trained myself so much that it's Pavlovian. Every time I get on a plane, out comes a laptop and I start writing. So it is really, if you've got lots of time in your life and you don't have a lot of other people, demanding your time, it's just discipline. It's just setting aside time. It's like working out, like it's exercise. You just got to make the time. It's a priority. I'm not going to do anything else. It's here. But if you're busy, if you got a busy job, you got a busy family, then it really is just learning that you can write anywhere, and you can write with any amount of time. I literally once was at a Dragon Con in Atlanta, sci-fi convention, 80,000 geeks all together in Atlanta. It's awesome. I had literally 20 minutes between panel discussions. I sat down in the lobby, put my laptop literally in my lap. I got 20 minutes. I'm going to churn out the half of the next scene because I've got time. So it's practice like anything else. You exercise the muscles, you get better at it, but really is just finding those little time and just not waiting for the big, long, uninterrupted period of time to be available to you, because it probably isn't going to happen.
I would agree. I would agree. I definitely sometimes will say, do I really want to start? And I have, because of getting married and having kids and a farm and the coppersmithing business. Hold on, I'm gonna cough. Excuse me. Um, I do increment my days. So there are days where they are writing days and I'm not going to be distracted by copper work or emails. There are days I don't touch writing because there's no sense in just kind of like compartmentalizing my days of the week. And also then when I do sit down, I tell myself, okay, today you have a writing goal of a word count or a chapter count, or, there's goals so that I'm not just sitting there poking away, because sometimes when you do have those huge chunks of time, when I schedule them for myself, I actually I can squander hours of that time because, oh, I have all the time, right? I have 4 hours. This is amazing. Or I have 7 hours. This is amazing. I'm going to get so much done. But then also you're going, I have 7 hours. I'll get a bunch done. I can do other things too. And then all the distractions just start ping, ping, ping. And so I do try and force myself to hit a number so that I'm not wandering for my eighth cup of coffee. I only need 3. I really don't need 8, but I mean, I could just go wander and make myself another one. And that has helped really give me structure so that I hit deadlines, so that I do accomplish goals. And like you, I love sitting on an airplane. I love writing anywhere I can. I don't mind doing it with noise around me or anything. And I do think people tend to think they need these perfect environments to write. And it'll never be perfect. You can try the hardest you want to do that. You might get one day in your life that it's exactly the way you envision it in your head, but every other day is just crap. And you have to be able to just write and not worry about it being perfect. I think too, a detriment to writing that some people, I have seen them do, where they can't start again because they have to go back and reread a whole swath of what they've rewritten. It's to kind of get back into it. And I'm like, well, you're going to have to edit it anyway. Don't waste that time. But also, it if you have to do that, then outline the crap out of your book first. So you don't have, exactly where you're at in that outline, and you can just dive back in. It'll be such a time saver if you do that outline ahead of time.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. Both things you said there is, when it's time to write, do not go back and reread what you wrote last time, because it's just going to suck up the time. You're going to start rewriting it. You're just going to get anything done. So just forget it. It's first draft. Most of it's crap. Just keep moving forward. But also, you're right. If you haven't made an outline, maybe you don't know where you're going next. And so you have to go back and read. So 100%, Sarah. Yeah. Outline, at least have an idea. This is what I want to accomplish in this scene. This plot point, this character point, this thematic point. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that's what I have to do in this scene. Go with it. Keep moving forward, especially on the first draft. Just keep moving forward.
Yeah. Just to save time, because our lives are short and precious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To dovetail, because we're already talking about the challenges that come with finding time, right? What else do you and I'd like to talk about what we find as the most challenging part of writing life, and whether or not we offer solutions in this podcast, or we'll go into them in depth in other ones. But maybe I would think that there's a handful of common challenges all writers deal with as they live their lives as writers and authors. what would you name as at least one or two of those?
Yeah, well, in addition to the finding the time, because again, we certainly that one.
Definitely, I would say that's almost number one for sure.
The other one is the fact that it's a really solitary existence, and it can be really hard to share your excitement with anybody else. Like if you're the writer, you love your characters, you love the world you've created, you love the story you want to tell. But until it's written, it's kind of hard to share with anybody because either you're going to ruin the story for them, or they're just not going to get it because you talking about it is not as cool as you actually writing the story. So it can be really lonely. It can be really hard to um, to stay motivated because you feel like you're the only person in the world who cares about the story. And why do I even keep going? Because nobody else cares. That can be a really strong sentiment that can bring a writer down. And it's important to fight through that and keep telling yourself, no, this is the best story ever. And when people read it, they're going to be amazed and they're going to love it. And even if you are not published yet, just tell yourself, yeah, this one is going to be amazing. And when it's finished, the whole world will see. So you have to keep that inner positivity going. And however you find it, I mean, we talked about the drive to write, this sort of this impulse within us. That will keep most authors going, but we all have bad days. We all have like, oh, I'm never going to finish this. Oh, everything I've written sucks. We have those days. And if we don't have anyone to really talk to about it or to sort of give us that pep talk that we need, it can be hard to keep pressing on. So yeah, the solitary nature of writing is definitely one of the challenges. And it can be a tough one. But I think finding other authors is a great way to do it. Because even if you don't want to tell each other about your stories, you can at least talk about the process and talk about writing and just share that impulse that you have. That can be enough to help you get through it, to know you're not alone.
And I think social media, as much as I abhor it so much, and I know it's necessary for marketing and for business and all of those other aspects, I do think that there has become this amazing, strong community of writers on various platforms, whether that's, book talk on TikTok or book threads on threads, or I mean, X, Twitter, there used to be,
Mm.
writer's life. I don't keep up with all of them because I have a writer's life outside of social media, but I do know that there are some really strong writing communities out there that band together and create a sense of community, even if it's not in person. I also think if you can find a local group of writers who are all, I have a small group. We don't get together that often at all. We mostly have seen each other at each other's weddings over the past few years. Um, and children's events and things like that. But when we do sit, one's a poet, one writes, mysteries, one writes romance, one writes chick lit, I write historical fiction. It's all over the place, but just sitting in a room, and even if you only type out 100 words or 500 words in the 2 hours while you're drinking and talking, it's fun. And I but I wanted to spin on the social media thing because my point and a challenge that I think so many writers have, and I'm going to pull my experience from working in the film industry, is so many writers struggle to talk about what they're writing or what their book is about in a succinct way that gets somebody interested. And so then you feel like you're screaming into the void. So many people will show a photo of their book cover or kind of say, I just released a book and here's what it's about. And it's not a strong enough sentence or pitch, and it feels like it's just floating in the ether, and I think people then feel like they are shouting into that void because there's just no engagement on any of that. And I do think one of the challenges, especially novelists, because we're not trained to do this way, is to really have strong, quote, log lines for our books. I was doing a panel with a friend of mine at a writers conference several years ago, pre-COVID, and and we went out for lunch with two older women who were writers who I think they had published books or not. But funny thing is, we sat at lunch with them for an hour. We had just done a class about being succinct about the books, and we had kind of got going on their books, and these women rambled for hours, like the full hour about their books. She and I didn't get to talk at all about our books. We didn't at all, right? And we walked away from that, and she goes, her name is Robin, and she was like, I have no idea what those books were about. We listened to them for an hour and we walked away going, A, don't know still what that was about. B, definitely not interested in reading it. I'm not buying that, picking it up. So I do think that's something that is a challenge with writing and trying to get your work out there, people interested, is knowing how to communicate it in a way that drives attention to it.
Yeah, and even bringing it back to the motivation for the author, it's a good exercise for all of us to go through is what is this book about? Because that log line you can come up with, that elevator pitch. Um, if you, as the author, can't do that for your book, then you might need to do some more work on your book. What is this book? What are you writing about? Like, why are you doing it? And we'll get into this in the craft of writing a lot when we can talk about structure and character and so on. What is this book about? You have to be able to boil it down. And if you, as the author, can't, then that actually might be a good exercise for you to go through to really figure out, okay, well, I've got all these ideas, but what story am I trying to tell here? And that can be very inspiring to you as the author. You can really go, okay, this is what I'm trying to say. Yes. And it can reignite that excitement that you had by just really getting you focused again.
Yeah, and I think it can get the people that you tell excited about your book too. That's something that and I will expound more on this when we do get into the Hollywood stuff, but whether it's an editor or an agent, on the publishing side or an executive that you're talking to briefly at a networking event, who's in film, you really have to be able to you almost have to challenge yourself to be as concise and exciting as possible because then they might have more questions and then you've engaged them. And that's what you want to do when you're talking to your book about your book with your spouse too. But I think it's a huge challenge. And so I definitely do want to spend an entire episode talking about our elevator pitches and the idea of a log line for books as well as for scripts. Um, so that would be my biggest one that I notice the most, I think authors struggle with.
Yeah, that'll be a funny one, by the way, when we talk about elevator pitches and log lines, because sometimes we don't always understand exactly what we're saying. Like when I likened my new book to Bridgerton, and you kind of went, "Whoa!"
I
I went, "Oh,
did.
wait,
You
maybe
were like
not
Bridgerton. I'm like, really? Are you sure? Did you watch it?
Bridgerton." Yeah, so okay, maybe I was a little anyway, whatever. But see, but it's fun, and okay, maybe not quite Bridgerton, but something Bridgerton light.
Well,
Anyway,
or what we're doing now, or like you have to use the comps, right? And that's something that is an interesting thing that we'll probably want to talk to too, is I think finding comps for your books can be a challenge because you you can either go really far back and get something really famous, but then it's like, but you're comparing this to, To Kill a Mockingbird? Like, that's you think you're that good, right? But you can't use something so obscure that it didn't sell well. You can't use something that's or my favorite right now is something that we're working on. It's like Outlander, but set in a different place and no time travel. And I'm like, so it's not Outlander.
yeah,
Stop
yeah,
using that.
yeah. I remember one of the best books I ever published. The log line we had for it was science fiction. It was weird. It was like nothing else. And I sat there in a pitch session and I said, okay, this book is basically Doctor Who meets Battlestar Galactica. And they were all like, whoa. So just two of the most extreme opposites in sci-fi you can find. Yeah, mash those together. So, you can have some fun with this for sure. But anyway,
Yeah,
we're getting way into
we are, but that'll happen on here. So people should just be aware from the start.
right. Yeah. Um, so I don't know. Why do we keep doing this, Sarah? Why do we keep writing?
I think, as I mentioned before, I know if I don't, I'll probably go insane.
Yeah.
It's an outlet. It's a creative outlet. It's a exercise in self-exploration, perhaps trying to answer, questions I have about myself or about an idea. And I also think I do it because, well, not think, I know I do it because I like to share and I like to tell stories and I like to create and I also like the idea of building something that will outlast me.
Mm.
And I would hope that some of my books or my scripts do.
I would echo all those things. So everything you said, and because writing makes me happy. I
Oh,
am so happy when I'm writing. Like really, it's the best feeling in the world. To finish a novel and to know, you know what, that was pretty good actually. Oh yeah, it's got to be edited, but I'm happy with that, and I'm happy that I did that. And the act of creation, it cannot be understated, or overstated. It's such an amazing thing to create something that didn't exist, and that's really cool. I like it a lot. So,
yeah.
writing, it's great. Okay, well, I think that's our show for the day. Don't forget, everyone who's been listening, to subscribe so you don't miss any of our chats, and feel free to leave a review because it really does help us a lot. You can catch up with Sara at saradahman.com and on Instagram.
And don't forget, you can find Ben at bennettrcoles.com, as well as Facebook and Instagram as well. And we wanted to thank you again for joining us today. Please, as always, reach out if there's anything specific, any topics you'd like us to cover. And we will see you again when we next chat all about writing.
This has been All About Writing with Ben and Sara.